In today's edition of The One Percenters Never Fail to Disappoint Us, the CEO and founder of BlackRock, the private equity fund with the largest assets under management in the world, Larry Fink, woke up and instead of saying let them eat cereal, just said let them work to death forever. He came out in a very large speech given this week at an economic forum and said people are absolutely insane to think they have a right to retire at 65 years of age, and that if you had those ideas or thought that you were somehow entitled to retire at the age of 65, you are living in an idea based in the Ottoman Empire. And let's talk about why this guy needs us to get really, really comfortable with working forever, which is why they're planting these seeds a little at a time to build up apathy so we just stop fighting the inevitable, according to them. And then let's talk about what we can do about it and why we can simply starve them out. Let's get into it. Larry here is suggesting that if you think that retirement at 65 is a reasonable expectation or even goal for your life, has you living in what he says was an idea that originated in the Ottoman Empire, and that it's absolutely crazy that we would attach ourselves to such a notion when it's clear we need to be working much, much, much longer than that. Fear not, in today's edition of The One Percenters Just Keep Gaslighting Us, if you actually look up how long people lived during the Ottoman Empire, when he claims the retirement age of 65 became a commonplace idea, the estimated average lifespan of an adult human was between 30 and 40 years. Which means, I guess, even in the Ottoman Empire, we were conditioned to say we were going to work to death, and that you finally got to retire if you somehow survived at 65. I have done a lot of research today and can find nothing referencing us starting to retire at 65 years old. But hey, a red herring is a red herring. Look over here about this issue while I'm over here trying to do something else. What could he be doing over here? A little background on BlackRock. BlackRock is the largest holder of private equity holdings in the world with, you read that right, 10 trillion US dollars of assets under management. Trillion with a T. This makes BlackRock's holdings the equivalent of the world's fourth largest economy in GDP. With America having a GDP of approximately $23 trillion, China having a GDP of approximately $17 trillion, and coming in third, if it were its own economy, the state of California. After that, we have BlackRock. They have more money than all but 3 economies in the entirety of the world. Don't worry. We should definitely listen to them about how we're going to live the rest of our lives because they already own us and all of our politicians. Simple look at who they're buying off in a given election cycle, and you can see they give to both parties pretty generously, while historically giving to more Republicans in the House and more Democrats in the Senate. And fear not, we wouldn't want anybody to think that perhaps just paying for lobbyists was sufficient to sway Washington in all matters economic and policy. All you need to do is look and see that a full-on 3 leaders with the New York-based BlackRock are currently serving in President Joe Biden's cabinet, including the leader of the National Economic Council that quite effectively serves as the lead economic advisor to all of President Biden's decision-making. But don't worry, they've done it in the previous administrations, Republican and Democrat as well. So why are the private equity funds all scrambling out to try and plant seeds to convince all of us that we need to save more and work longer, until we die? Should it come as any surprise? Well, the answer is no. The reality is that over the last year and a half of ever increasing interest rates, money has gotten expensive for private equity to buy. And their entire business model is built on the ability to borrow cheap money and leverage their finance purchases with debt. They can't do that right now, so they're having to turn to other sources of capital. And the primary source of capital that they're turning to are pensions and retirement investments. BlackRock is one of the biggest managers of retirement funds in the world. So why is it then a surprise that he's saying we suddenly need to go out and buy more pension plans, invest more in things that he gets to manage, he and others can manage? It's because they're running out of money and they're really coming up against some problems. Ever since last year, private equity-backed companies are out of cash. They can't find anyone to buy their companies so that they can flip them like they have historically been able to do because money was cheap to borrow. And so now they're engaging in what many are calling a secondaries market. The secondaries market has been called, even by private equity investment bankers that regularly comment on this for economic publications, it looks like a pyramid scheme. And if you look here, you can see that investors are worried. They're no longer selling items on an open market or a free market where you would get a real valuation. Instead, they're not able to find anyone real to buy the products they have to sell to close out their funds. So they've started flipping them to one another or to their own secondary funds, which is entirely speculative. As a result, they're less able to get the money they need to keep their schemes afloat, so they're turning to pensions and retirement funds. And if you look here, you can see that increasingly pension funds are sharing part of the blame for private equity's horror stories. That's because private equity does well when they bankrupt their own companies. Private equity firms get money out right away. They dividend back their investors right away, and they succeed the most while their companies fail. Right now, it's estimated that a company owned by private equity is 10 times more likely to fail than a company that is not. And if a company has been previously purchased by private equity, that number goes up to 23 times as likely to fail and end up in bankruptcy, with the entire American public left carrying the bag. It's for this exact reason that everyday Americans are starting to fight back. Because historically, private equity has been unregulated, so we have no way to fight back. Current antitrust laws never conceived of major private equity funds and corporations owning 80% of the S&P 500, which is exactly what's happening right now. They own 80% of the S&P 500 that used to be owned by individual investors. So there was never a conception in current antitrust laws for us to do anything legally about this. However, maybe people are finding a way. And there's a chance this group of pensioners might be laying the groundwork for all of us to start fighting back. People that have retirement accounts with AT&T and Lockheed Martin are suing AT&T and Lockheed Martin for investing their pensions through transfers to Apollo Global Capital, one of the largest private equity funds in the United States. It's a first of its kind litigation, and it's being duplicated now thrice over. 3 times people have done it. And all of the former workers are alleging that they've put their plans at risk, investing them with these very risky investments that don't have the same type of government oversight and regulation that more conservative and steady and stable investments offer. They're suing under the Department of Labor guidelines, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974. And everyone is watching this very, very closely to see how it moves through the court system, because it could provide a roadmap. The reality is that historically, pensions performed better when there were higher interest rates, when they were invested in regular bonds and regular treasuries and money markets. But because there's been ultra low interest rates the previous 15 years, they had a lot of unfunded pensions. And so they needed a way to cook their books a little bit. And because private equity investments hold for 10 years with estimated returns, they get to put that estimated return as what's really on their books for that 10 years until the chickens come home to roost, which lowers their liabilities in appearance so that the states don't get involved, and it doesn't account for how risky the pensions investments really are when they're with private equity. It just creates a very comfortable look for the people that are currently managing the fund. The reality is that private equity is having a really hard time right now. Their secondaries market is absolutely becoming a pyramid scheme, and they need pensions and investment accounts from us to survive, but it doesn't mean we're ever going to get our money back. More likely than not, what's going to happen is that eventually this bubble is going to burst and the pensions are going to get caught up in the mix. The reality is that retirement at 65 was something that we could work towards, often on a single income, with our bills, our homes, our vehicles paid off, and we could expect a nice retirement. It wasn't until the reconsolidation of wealth ever upwards, with the constant strip mining of wealth from the working and middle class and small businesses all across America, largely driven by private equity, that it became necessary for us to even consider having to work longer, and it wasn't because we were living longer. It's because our money just doesn't work anymore, because our economy just doesn't work anymore. They've taken everything and extracted it all the way to the top. The reality is, though, that the people at the top still depend on us in capitalism to continue to hand them money. And right now, they've run out of money to borrow, and so they need us to continue to save them by continuing to work forever and invest in things they think that we should trust them to invest. And we just don't have to do that. The reality is that if we start starving them out, they have to go away. We've got to stop feeding the monster. There's lots of ways to do that, with boycotts, with not buying from mega corporations, with supporting small businesses, with choosing good ethical investments. But they need us more than we need them, and it's time. It's time. Boycott season is here, and it's time for us to eat and for them to starve. Support your local businesses. Feed your local economies. Coming up, I can't wait to share with you a story that I've been researching for the past several weeks about a nonprofit that made a mistake investing their pensions with private equity that have left them with a massive deficit that is not only hurting our economies, our communities, and our natural resources, but hurting our children. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany. Don't forget to like, follow, comment, share, and repost, and please stick around. If we want to make a difference and fight back to save small businesses and our communities and stop the ever-increasing extraction of wealth wealth from the middle class. We have to work together, and it's going to take every single one of us. I am so glad you're here.